Dr. Nicholas Allen is an art historian at Port Elizabeth University in South Africa. He believes the image could be of a man who died in the 14th century.
By the time we come to the 13th and 14th centuries, the use of relics comes to an all-time high, where it developed into what could be described as a multi-million-pound industry.
He has his own theory about how the image on the shroud was made, that it's the world's first photograph.
To do it, one would have needed a body. That person would more than likely have been dead because of the time needed for the exposure, and that person would have had to be kept perfectly still. The person would have had to have been hung up in sunlight for at least 8 hours opposite a crystal lens, which had been placed in the aperture of a wall around a room, which we would now call a camera obscura, or a darkened chamber.
Allen claims that all the tools needed to produce this image would have been readily available by the late 13th century.
All you would have needed at that time was somebody who knew how to make a lens, and there were plenty of people making lenses at that time. Somebody with some alchemical knowledge, because all you need is some silver sulfate, and a camera obscura, which is exactly what we have here today, set up as they would have done it in the 1300s.
Lenses were widely used throughout medieval Europe, with spectacles being introduced to Italy in the late 13th century.
This is a convex lens cast from a lens in the British Museum. That was made around about 150 common era, which would have looked something like this when it was new. And two of these lenses placed together make a condenser with which you can project an image.
Allen also believes that the medieval alchemists had a primitive understanding of photochemistry.
To capture an image, as you see on the screen behind me, is a relatively simple thing to do. But now to permanently capture that image, we have to make sure that the cloth that the image is being projected onto contains light-sensitive material. And what we're using here is silver sulfate, which was available in the 13th century.
Once Allen has made the silver sulfate solution, he soaks his linen shroud. Just like a piece of photographic film, the cloth is now light sensitive. He stretches it over a frame and opens up the aperture, exposing the screen to his image. As the silver sulfate reacts with the UV rays, an image is gradually burnt into the cloth. It will take about 3 days to fully develop.
The image that you see here is in effect a chemical scorch, and it only appears on the upper fibrils of the linen. If you turn to the back of this cloth and were to look at the back, there'd be no image here whatsoever. The image is only on the side that the sunlight struck the cloth. And like the Shroud of Turin, this image is not made from dyes, pigments or powders. It's just simply oxidized linen.
To the naked eye, the image is very subtle. But just like Secondo Pia's photographic plates of the shroud, when this picture is reversed, the ghostly face can be seen in much more detail. Allen believes the silver sulfate residue left in his cloth after drying will also be found in the shroud and could be used to confirm that the cloth is medieval.
There are microscopic amounts of atomic silver, pure silver, trapped in the linen. We could end this discussion for once and for all about how the shroud was made if the authorities would allow a non-destructive test on the cloth to look for silver content. Remembering in 1977 the Sturt Committee only tested up to iron in their tests. They didn't test for gold or cadmium or tin or silver. If they found parts per million of silver in the Shroud of Turin, it would prove that it had been through this particular technique.